All right, we are getting started again on the object file, image file visualizer explorer project for the Handmade Network Real Reinvention Jam. As I say at the beginning of many of my streams, this project and everything else that I do on the streams and on YouTube and over here on MrForth.com, it's all funded by people like you who see what I'm doing and think it's cool and worthwhile, and who go and check out MrForth.com/membership and decide to become a monthly or yearly supporter or member. And there's a lot of cool things you get as rewards for supporting it, and also you're helping to work on helping me to keep working on these projects, which I hope will be of value to you as well. So if you're interested in what I'm doing, maybe check that out and see if you might consider becoming one of the supporters of the lab. With that, let's get right into the programming for today. So what I've got so far is this list of the symbols in an object file. That's pretty much all we can do. If I open up a DLL, there's nothing. So I think I have two main things I could work on, right? There's sort of this section and this section. I could add in more of the file features, so I could list out symbols from images. I don't have the exports and imports from my DLLs and EXUs yet. I could work on the list of sections. Both file types need sections. I could build out all the stuff that lives inside of the header. That's sort of complex and heterogeneous nod of information all on its own. There's the relocations, which are important, although listing them out as a list is going to be less valuable than some other ways of visualizing them, so that's less interesting. And then there's the diagnostics problem, which is we haven't even begun touching the primitives we would need to do a good job with that. We would probably need to be able to visualize the file as binary, like a hex view of it. Right? We would probably need to say things like we need some kind of file hex view / minimap view of the file so that we can start seeing things in ranges. Maybe a section view. Right, we need some like ways to view the file as data, which we don't have. So these kinds of things. The other thing we could do is work on the base features, right? So right now, when I open up something like the dump OBJ, we have this table here. It's all laid out and nice looking, but my highlighting is super lazy. It's just each row is highlightable on its own, and that's basically all I have. What if I wanted to be able to do things like say, hey, these are section numbers? I should be able to highlight just the section number and say like view this section, jump to this. Right clicking that should give me all kinds of stuff related to that particular section in the file, right? I should be able to say, hey, jump to this symbol in some kind of useful way by being on this row here, right? I should be able to put this side by side, right, with things like a hex view or a minimap view, so that I can say where are, filter down to just those sections that are in, or symbols that are in section 7, and mark them up for me here, right? There's lots of stuff I'd like to be able to do, and that's going to require building out more and more UI primitives than what I have. So those are the two big things I could do: build out more file dumping features, more file exploring features, put more of the file contents into the program. And the other one is build out more UI primitives, build out more affordances into my UI language so that I can start getting more features out of the system. Now, there's pro and con to going each direction, so let me talk about that. If I start by building out features, the pro to that is the more, or file features, right? If I start building out the features from the dumping more information from my input files, the advantage is that I get more stuff done for the jam, right? I get like you can get more out of your files, right? So if I have 1 week to do this, we've spent 1 out of my 7 days, so this is day 2. If I do that right now, I could just guarantee that, hey, at the very least, you'll get everything out of the header, you'll get all your symbols and sections, and you'll get your relocations, maybe in an unuseful way, but you'll get them. Like, well, we can build it all out so that you get as much as possible. But it will mean I write a lot of code early on. It will mean that I build a lot of code early on that are structured with a very primitive version of the UI structure, right? I've got this UI structuring system, right? I've got code for structuring UI. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I've got these rows, and I've got cells in my rows. So I'm taking data out of my files and structuring them into this UI data structure. And it is currently underpowered. We know I'm going to want to build it up. And if I start dumping more and more information into this, then when I go to iterate on this, every time I change a little bit what it means for a row to contain a cell, or I change what can be done with a cell, or I change the relationship of highlighting the cell and the row at the same time or something, every time I want to advance the affordances of the UI data structure, I'm going to have a bunch more code, right? Right now I have a small amount of code that just constructs one of those. If I have a lot of code that constructs one of those, then iterating on that is going to be slower, right? And of course, the pros and cons for going the other way are just the flip of that, right? If I iterate on this now, I can iterate on it quickly, but I'll be iterating on it in a vacuum of the full scope of information. So I kind of want to take maybe little baby steps of both, right? We got kind of like an n times m. We have a sort of product of two different things here. The complexity is going to grow, like the number of file features that I'm dumping times the number of UI features that I'm supporting. And I don't want to shoot one of them full up and then have to painfully iterate the other one for the rest of the project. But I also want to make, and I can't, either way I do it, it's going to cause a problem for the other side, right? If I shoot my UI features to a high complexity now in a vacuum, then they might be wrong for half the things the file needs. But if I shoot out and do all of the file features, right, I dump everything out of my images and objects today, then each new UI feature is going to have, several hundreds of lines of code that I have to refactor every time I improve that. So I want to do a little bit of each back and forth. That way the growth and the massaging of them can kind of balance each other out, right? I want to minimize the amount of new refactoring that has to be done for new UI stuff. So I want to start catching UI problems early, but I need more examples of what the UI might need to support. So I think we'll do a little bit of both. Let's start with this. I'm going to start with, let's dump out the sections. We weren't doing that yesterday, so let's start with just dumping out all of our sections. So I'm going to put on some music, and this is just going to be a little bit of rote work. We got to pull out some stuff from the parser. We got to pull out, once we have some stuff in the parser, we got to do a little UI programming. Constructing those rows and cells and stuff, the conversion. Basically, I have to convert from the parser's version of the structure to the UI data structure. All right. Tool, I think I just explained. Did you misunderstand, possibly? I did explain just now what I'm doing. I'm going to start with the sections list. You also might have missed the first half of my explanation of what I'm doing. All right, well, the short version is step one, I'm going to add section parsing abstracted from the dumper into the parser. Just like we did with the symbol table and the header yesterday, I need to get sections going. Parse. Section table. Ooh, two of you missed yesterday's stream. I guess I didn't even realize that. There were some other folks here. Someone who has the same screen name color as you. So I missed that. Let me show you what we've got. Let me just show you. So we can open up object files and image files, but only object files do anything interesting so far because we just did the symbol table from the object file type. So we can scroll around and see those, right? We did some, like, I can page up and page down. I can jump to the bottom, see what we got here. Stuff, so stuff, who knows? You know, lots of weird stuff. Lots of weird stuff, who knows? Jump to the top. So that's what we got so far. I'm adding section table today. You'll see more of it as we go. All right, so this needs to come out. Parse symbol table? No. Section table. One of the things we have to do while I'm working on this is make sure that the dumper keeps working, because I'm extracting code out. I'm pulling code out of the dumper. So I want to keep running it again to make sure it's still good. Okay, so that looks good. So I should be able to parse the section table. You know what? I made the default the wrong thing. The default should be that it's collapsed. And the root should be the one that is special. You know, since you mention it, every time I am dancing around to music you can't hear, I always think about, like, how am I going to fix this someday? And I'm still pretty partial to the idea of setting up, like, a Spotify jam group. I don't know if anyone else would ever join that. Like, if I guess this is the question. If I set up a Spotify profile that was, like, my Mr. Forth streaming profile, and I posted my little jam session link so that anyone who wanted to could be on the same jam session as me, would anyone here join that? If I put in the work, would that mean anything to anybody, or would it just be a waste of my time? Yeah, I just don't want to deal with VODs getting muted. I don't want to deal with copyright notices on my YouTube stuff. Yeah, that's the thing. I kind of like it being optional. I like the idea. Like, I wish what we could do is that, like, I could set up a stream with channels of different content and let people decide what they want. Maybe some people just want to hear me. Maybe, like, I sometimes put stuff on and I don't intend to watch the video. I just want to hear the programmer yapping in the background, you know? I want to put my own music on and do my own thing and hear a programmer yapping. I want to hear the keys clicking and a programmer yapping. That's the two things I want. Right, right. I'm not so worried about the Twitch issue, but it's kind of an issue. Right, exactly. Like all we need, and this is the same. It's not just the streaming stuff. Lori Master in the chat is describing exactly what I think is the obvious next step. There's another thing which is like that, all of that combined. So there's broadcast, and then there is conference calling. You know, like sometimes me and Abner get on his Twitch channel and hang out, or he gets other people on his Twitch channel hang out, or you know whatever. And setting those up is crazy too. Like, how is it not the case that I can't create just a flow of like, here are my devices. I have a camera and a mic, and I have, you know, desktop audio, and there's someone else who has a camera and a mic and desktop audio, and we want to create a situation where I'm saying, okay, there's a personal channel from my audio to Abner and Abner's audio to me, so those get wired up, and then all of my audio goes to the stream, and then through to one of the channels of the stream, and Abner's audio and his desktop audio and his screen go to the screen, and my camera goes to the stream, and his camera goes to the stream. Like, what is this? Like, we have so many different types of media devices for inputs and outputs, and we don't have any way of like wiring it up so that everyone sees what we want them to see, even though we try it all day long. It's like the entire economy feels like it runs off of technology like that, and it's so bad to set up. Yeah, and I can understand if there's like a limit where it's like, hey, we only want one audio stream to come out. Like, we can't have the split stream for every user to pick one of 3 different audio things. That could be a bandwidth issue for sure. But there's still a problem of, even if we're going to have to live within the constraints of the bandwidth issue, just the plumbing of getting each piece to go where it's supposed to go is crazy. Right. Like, I think the bandwidth problem is not. I'm not trying to sweep that under the rug. I think that should be encoded into the interface for constructing these setups. All right. This is good. This is indeed going to force me to think about better UI features here. So let's start with this. You know, people, you know, the Discord wishlist includes a handmade OBS, and I think that that's a real valid project. My concern would be that people would just clone OBS rather than reinvent OBS. Okay, so now I can open up my DLL and look at my sections, and that's cool. Let me turn my music off for a second. There's a couple of problems. Yeah, they kind of go together, don't they? You do need a server side thing too, but I'm talking like the thing that bothers me is actually the interface. I think that half of what's wrong with it is just an interface problem that could be solved by OBS. The conference calling part would make it a little harder. Like the full protocol would be a project from the ground up of a completely different client and server interface or architecture. The reason I think it would be cool to start with the OBS side is I think you could improve the OBS interface with the server with the protocols that already exist. But that's just the interface side. It's true you need an architecture side improvement as well to get the whole thing we're talking about. Okay, so the sections here are cool. There's a couple problems popping out, right? So one is there's no labels here. So this, I know this is V size because I just typed it, but if I came back to this a year from now, how would I know which one is V size and which one is F size? Like I wouldn't know. Also, I would kind of like these to be. Also, the flags function appears to just be busted. Let me go check that out first. I see. So it's like this. Okay, so those are better. Now, I gotta think about this. How do I want to... I think we need to add a concept of a table header. Okay, I think... Okay. Okay. Some things I'm gonna have to change are popping out at me. All right, let's switch to UI improvements. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay, so that would look like... Okay, yeah, I like that better. So everything lines up like this, and if it has a folder icon, it shifts the text over to make room. Nice. Now, when I open this, I want a line that comes down. And I want that line to include the name vertically oriented as I scroll in small text. Okay, so let's see if we can do that. So the line, how will we achieve that? Well, we're going to look at if this is expanded. What is this, a guideline, a margin line? Y top equals. You do all the children. Not bad, but I don't like it. Let's try a little bit more intense color. There we go. I like that. I also want to give it just a little bit of tweak here. Very good. That's looking good to me. Okay, let's see here. Okay, less. Perfect. Now if I scroll down, yeah. Okay. Where is this? Okay, there it is. Uh, Ugh. All right. Okay, so what's next? I've got the... Right, I want to do that text on the side. That's what I was building towards. Um, this is going to be strange, but I want to do this first. Okay. Okay. why is the second one not working now? Okay, there it is. So how did that happen? This one, isn't it? Yeah. So how does that work? There we go. Okay. So, turn my music off for a sec so I can think out loud. I'm still trying to get to rendering that text vertically. So I think I'd like to try to do that now. Let me see if I have anything that does that. It doesn't look like I built that in as a helper. Let me see how hard it would be to actually do that. That might be more than I realized. Looks like I did not plan on supporting that. You know, the ability to rotate my text. I mean, it's built in at the lowest level it's possible because I can just do quads. But batch push string looks like it's just... You get the implementation version? Yeah, it's just applying horizontal layout. So do we want to stop what we're doing and add rotated text to my code base today? Or do we want to give up on that feature for now? Kind of feels big. Kind of feels like too big. I mean, it is a 7-day jam. It could be a good feature to get into my code base, but it could be the rest of today just getting that working. And then that means we have one less day for, that means that the bigger UI features like things that do stuff and put new information on the screen will be taking a back seat. Other approaches I could take would be to have, like, you know how when you're scrolling down, sometimes some stuff, like the portion you're scrolling, sometimes there are things which like don't scroll out. They they become sticky at the top of the at the top of the view. I could have something like that where whichever section you're in, whichever folder you're in, stays sticky. That would be more doable. And that would go. That's something I'm gonna need anyways if I'm gonna do table headers. So I think that that's the right idea. Let's not do rotated text today. Let's try to make it so that I can pin things to the top as I'm scrolling down. I want things to stay in the view. If they're sort of header-like. Let's take a look at it. As I scroll down, I lose the first and second folders there. In order to keep them, what would I have to do? First of all, let's decide which ones need to be pinned. Now, that means it's pinned, but that doesn't mean we are going to see it, because some things which are pinned are still not on screen. In order for it to be on screen, one of its children has to actually be on screen. Ugh. Okay, let me think. Gonna do some whiteboard work here. Okay. So the scenario I'm thinking about is like this, right? We've got we got some kind of hierarchy like this, right? And then we have a view box like this. You know what I'm saying? And so the question is, how am I going to figure out? So what should happen is somehow when I render, let's see, where's my finger? When I render this row right here, it should show up right on top, right? It should show up right on top of the view, right? Or rather, it should be the first thing in the window, at the top of the window. And then when I render this row, it shouldn't show up. And when I render this row, it should. And when I render this row, it'll show up, but it'll show up right there, not at the top of the screen. So how do I determine when I'm rendering the first row that I actually need to see it? The hard thing is the information won't be derived until much later. You know what I'm saying? The question is, do I render this as something floating at the top or not? That's the question, right? And the answer doesn't come until like 5 items later when we find out that we are still inside of that parent when the first thing that appears on screen finally gets rendered. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's not a trivial trick to pull. So here are some ways I could approach it. One is I could try to pre-calculate the height of the expanded children underneath each row, right? I could say, hey, I'm going to render this row. Hey, check real quick. What's the total height? Will the current... That way I could find out right in line if the thing I'm about to render goes on the screen or not. Then I don't have to wait till later to discover it. I'll just do the work now to discover it. Figuring out the total height is then the hard part. And the total height will be calculated by looking at not just the number of children, but the number of children plus the number of children in all of the the number of all ancestors that are currently expanded or are visible, right? It's just like, it's a complex thing to calculate. Now I could track that. I could track that as state inside each node, and every time I toggle the expansion, I could propagate the change up and down the hierarchy to figure out the height of everything else. It's not just children count, remember, because like, for instance, let me show you this. The children count for this root is 3. 1, 2, 3. And the ancestor count is 6, 7, 8. But I also have expansion. So, for instance, this might have 10 children, but it's collapsed. So it's the ancestor count of all expanded ancestors. Rather, all ancestors whose... All descendants, I should be saying. All descendants whose ancestors are all expanded, those ones are counted. Now, I could track that as a dynamic state with the expansion. But I can't just calculate it from child count. That's too simple. It doesn't calculate the right thing. I could track it as state. I could also calculate it in line. I could say, hey, before we do the UI, well, the problem with that is we actually change the expansion state right here in line. which is going to make all of this even crazier. Maybe I should defer the change and expansion to the end of the frame, so it's a 1 frame of delay kind of thing. If I were to start doing a frame of delay on that. Right, so the other way we could do this is whenever an item shows up on the screen, we can say, instead of, like, when we go to render a node, if it doesn't fit on the screen, it doesn't show up. But if we go to render a node and then we look through its ancestors, and we do decide it's going to be on screen, then we can track through its ancestors and make sure that they are all visible first. Yeah, I'll call you a rock. Hi, Rock. That's exactly the other alternative. The cool thing about that is that it does not require pre-calculation, but we'll have to abstract out the code for rendering a single row and make sure that we can call that from 2 different paths, because we'll sometimes reach it by just putting something on the screen the normal way, and we'll sometimes reach it with this floating path. So I think, and that might be fine. That might be easy. Question: how hierarchical are OBJ files? So OBJ files themselves aren't that hierarchical. The hierarchy but they have like lots of lists of things. They're lists of several different things, right? There's a list of sections, a list of symbols. Each section can have a list of call-free locations. So it's partially hierarchical, but it's mostly a hierarchy in the sense that it's a set of lists, if that makes sense. So it's not super deeply hierarchical, and that's part of why it's more like a set of tables that I'm trying to put together. But I want to be able to do that flexibly. I don't want to have to make a bespoke UI system for each type of table, or make you know what I'm saying? Like, I kind of want to be able to just throw tables together on the fly. Hi, it's going well. Welcome. I think the right thing to do for now is going to be to abstract out the code that draws a singular row, so that I have the option to do the second thing where I have 2 different ways at arriving at the render. Yeah, table headers are the same thing. What I'm coding today, let me show you what I'm working on. I'll just run it for you. It's this, so I've got these object files that my compiler produces before I send them to the linker to create executables. And then I have executables like the DLLs and EXEs. And so I'm making a thing that lets me open these files and explore the contents of these executable files and these object files. So far, we have just like a basic sort of table and hierarchy system. More to go. Oh, you're right. I'm in this mode. Here we go. This is what I'm trying to show you. You can open these things up. We can see all the different labels and things. So many. So that's what I'm working on. And I'm working on, right now I'm working on upgrading some of the UI capabilities. So what my big goal here is that since I can do, Yeah, exactly. I want to be able to scroll to the top and bottom of the parent faster. Um, so what I want to get to is like I want to work on some of these UI things. We were adding sections, and there's a lot of stuff here like you see how there's just like all these numbers and it's not clear what they mean? I want to be able to add table headers by the end of the day, and that's part of why we need floating elements on top, and a part of why I want to be able to track things like this. So I'm going to be trying to get to making these tables look a little bit nicer with table headers that are sticky and uh, now that I say I don't want to, table headers would complicate the problem of calculating the height as well. So let's not do calculating the height. Let's do on demand, like I was saying. Let's work on that. So okay, let's figure out how to do this. So this does the children part. But all of this probably needs to go into the single part, right? So it's going to be like something like this. Um, yeah, this is for the Handmade Network Jam. It's also part of, since you're asking, it's also part of my work at the Mr. Forth Lab. So if you go to mrforth.com, you can read about what we do at the lab. And when I say we, what I mostly mean is me, although I do have a couple people who help out with some of the, like setting up the website and setting up the, we have a video index, which you can check out if you become a member. But over on this membership system announcement, I explained some of the projects that I'm working on that the members are funding, and this is this project. But it's this particular, I'm also jamming this week with the Handmade Network. But yeah, it's connected to my main work. What do you mean by a standard Explorer layout with the folders and a separate column to the left? You mean like this thing? Because this is not... It's not the worst idea, I suppose. Yeah, it would keep this clickable. Awesome, see ya. Yeah, there's some advantages to that because then the table view can be a sort of separate thing here. Um, and all right, let me get a little ambitious and think about how I might do this if I wasn't just going to do a single hierarchy for the whole thing. Let's get a little bit ambitious. All right. Maybe something like this, right? So we'd have something, instead of just a big hierarchy, we'd have a little mini hierarchy panel on this side, and then a table view here in the center, and whichever thing you select here, if it's a table, then you look at the table. If you select something that's not a table out of the set of options, then something else might be able to show up here. So tables for tables, but maybe other things can show up here. And yeah, we could have breadcrumbs here, so if you want to see the stack there, although I'm not sure we need breadcrumbs, it's an option. It's an option to have breadcrumbs there. We could also put the file name up here on the top. I don't know. That's an interesting possibility. Instead of trying to magically fit all the tables into a hierarchy dynamically in one giant unified data structure. The temptation I always feel is to try to get one single unified data structure for the whole thing rather than like a panel here and a panel here that have separate data structures that connect. But I think that there is a lot of validity in like structuring things that way. It might not be that, like, what I'm trying to do is getting harder and harder as I try to fit more and more features into one single unified data structure, rather than having my unified data structure be a pair of simpler data structures. This would be a major change, which is the downside. Be a lot more work. This would have some other advantages though. Like I would be able to do a more lazy parsing kind of thing, because I could say, look ahead far enough to figure out what we have. Like, do we have a symbol table? Do we have a section table? Do we have imports? Do we have exports? Etc. Etc. And then from there, create the list of things that are available, but not go and do the deep parse until someone clicks on it for the first time, and then deep parse, or deep parse in the background. Like, all those things become options. Right now I kind of have to do the whole thing at once with the way I'm doing it, because I have one unified data structure, so there's no cut points, there's no separation of the data structure into separate pieces, so that parts of it can be built later than others, right? Okay, this is really interesting stuff. I've been streaming for about an hour and a half. What I say is now is probably a good time for me to take my lunch break and think this all through. I think I take my lunch break and I think this all through. When I come back, if I still like this idea, then we'll start taking the steps that it'll require to restructure my UI system to look more like this. And if I don't like this idea, or if I want to make tweaks, I'll figure that out at lunchtime and come back with a fresh head. But since this is a big thing, and the alternative to doing the big thing is to try to track down. Let me actually unroll. So I was about to split these, and that was going to break. So let me get this back to a working state, and then I'll take my lunch break and think about these ideas. So single display. Let's just roll it back to there. Pop it in there. There we go. Okay. I'm going to call it there. Let's come back. Let's say in 30 minutes. Yeah, well, the when I say data structure, I'm meaning two different things. There's data structure as in what I literally store internally and construct. And there's also data structure as in the data structure that describes the final interface. So even if my parser constructs a unified data structure, my interface, one way or another, is its own data structure, right? Like the data structure of a table and getting the rows and columns right, that requires constructing the table data structure and getting the tree and the expansion of the folders and the selection. That's a data structure. And so the data structure that defines the interface is sort of one-to-one with it. I can't change the interface into a split panel that goes together and not have a split data structure. But that's okay. That's not a bad thing. It's just I'm more so naming that my instinct tends to always go towards a unified data structure because that's how it's tempting, and the more stuff you cram into a single unified data structure, the more magical it feels. But there is a limit to how much magic you want to try to get before it starts to become overwhelming to make more progress. Yeah, this file type thing won't last forever. This is a sort of stand-in for the whole header thing. These won't be folders anymore. They'll be tables, which will be cool. And there'll be other types of views that I might want to be able to expose. So, anyways, point is, let's take that break and get back in, let's say, 30 minutes. So it's currently almost noon here. So at 12:30 Pacific time, I will resume for another hour and a half stream or so. All right? I'll see y'all then.